Step back, ma'am. You're not allowed to interfere. The sentence didn't echo, it cut, sharp and certain, like it had been used before and would be used again. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the Lincoln Elementary pickup lane. Minivans idling, parents scrolling their phones, kids running into open arms. Everything looked normal. Everything sounded normal. Until that voice split it in two. Vanessa Brooks stopped mid-step. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't rushed. She had simply walked toward her son. But now there was a body between them. A barrier dressed in authority. Laura Bennett, third-grade teacher, stood firm, clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. Eyes narrowed with a confidence that didn't ask, it declared. Vanessa didn't respond right away. She didn't need to. Her gaze had already moved past the teacher. Past the tension. It landed exactly where it needed to. Ethan, 8 years old. Standing alone under a white oak tree near the edge of the playground. Backpack on the ground. Hands at his sides. Not crying. Not fidgeting. Just standing. Waiting. Every other child had already been picked up. Laughter drifted off toward the parking lot. Doors slammed. Engines started. But Ethan remained. Isolated in plain sight. Vanessa took one slow breath. The kind that steadies something deeper than nerves. Then she spoke. Why is my son standing alone? Her voice wasn't loud. Didn't have to be. It moved through the space with quiet precision. Laura tilted her head slightly, as if the question itself was inconvenient. He needs to learn discipline. The answer came too quickly. Too rehearsed. And then softer but not softer in impact. Kids like him need structure. A shift. Subtle but undeniable. A mother nearby glanced up. A father paused mid-step, keys in hand. Something in the air changed, like a room that suddenly realizes it's being watched. Vanessa's expression didn't crack. Not anger. Not surprise. Just a stillness that held. What exactly did he do? She asked. This time Laura's lips pressed tighter. You're escalating this unnecessarily. The words came with a hint of warning now, like Vanessa had crossed into territory she wasn't supposed to question. From the corner of the playground, a small voice drifted, almost swallowed by the wind. He didn't do anything. A little girl stood beside her mother, fingers curled into her sleeve, eyes fixed on Ethan. The mother gently pulled her closer, not speaking but not denying it either. Vanessa took a step forward. Not aggressive. Not hesitant. Just forward. The distance between her and her son shortened by a few feet, but the tension doubled. Ma'am, Laura said again, firmer this time, you need to step back. And that's when another presence entered the frame. Polished shoes on concrete. A measured pace. Principal Richard Hayes approached with the kind of calm that comes from years of controlling narratives. His smile was professional. Practiced. Empty. Is there a problem here? He asked, though his eyes had already chosen a side. Vanessa turned slightly, acknowledging him without giving him control. I asked a question. Hayes nodded, as if indulging her. And we're handling it. But right now you're disrupting dismissal procedures. Disrupting. The word hung there. Clean. Official. Convenient. Vanessa glanced back at Ethan. He hadn't moved. But now he was watching her. Not scared. Not confused. Just watching. And something in that look reached deeper than any accusation. The noise around her faded. The cars. The chatter. The routine. All of it dimmed into the background. For a brief second time folded. A hallway. Years ago. Different place. Same tone. Same implication. You don't belong here. The memory didn't linger. It sharpened. Vanessa's shoulders settled. Her posture changed in a way that wasn't obvious to everyone, but it was undeniable to those paying attention. When she looked back at the principal, her voice was even calmer than before. You're right, she said. This is a disruption. Hayes gave a small nod, thinking the moment had turned. It hadn't. Vanessa reached into her bag slowly, deliberately. No sudden moves. No urgency. Just intention. Her phone appeared in her hand like it had always been part of the plan. She unlocked it. Scrolled once. Selected a contact. The call connected almost instantly. I need the full compliance record on Lincoln Elementary, she said, her tone precise. Start with disciplinary actions over the last 12 months. Flag anything involving isolated student handling. A pause. Then a quiet, yes. I'll hold. Laura let out a short laugh under her breath, shaking her head. Who do you think you're calling? Vanessa didn't answer. Not yet. She stepped past the invisible line that had been drawn in front of her, closing the final few feet to Ethan. She bent slightly, not to comfort him, but to meet him where he stood. Her hand rested gently on his shoulder. Grounding. Present. The boy exhaled just once. Behind her, the principal's smile began to fade, just slightly, like a reflection losing light. Because something had shifted, and everyone could feel it, even if they didn't understand it yet. The call did not end. Vanessa did not lower the phone. She let the silence stretch just long enough for everyone to feel it, like a held breath no one could release. I am still here, she said calmly into the receiver. Pull the staff conduct logs as well. I want names attached. A faint voice answered on the other end, too quiet for anyone else to hear. But Vanessa nodded once as if the response confirmed everything she expected. Behind her, Principal Hayes shifted his weight. It was subtle, but it broke the illusion of control he had carried into the moment. Ma'am, he said, tone tightening. This is not the place to handle whatever investigation you think you are conducting. Vanessa ended the call without looking at him. The screen went dark. Then she turned, not rushed, not defensive, just precise. You said you were handling it, she replied. So let us be clear about what it is. Laura let out a breath that sounded more like impatience than confidence now. Your son refused to follow instructions, she said, louder this time, as if volume could solidify the claim. He disrupted the group, and we separated him to correct the behavior. Vanessa glanced down at Ethan. Did you refuse? She asked gently. Ethan shook his head once. No hesitación. No confusión. Just a simple, steady no. Vanessa looked back up. What instruction did he refuse? She asked. Laura opened her mouth, then paused, eyes flicking briefly toward the principal before returning to Vanessa. He was told to stay in line, she said. He stepped out. Why? Vanessa asked. Another pause. Longer this time. The principal stepped in. Children do not always have a reason, Hayes said smoothly. That is why structure is important. The phrase landed, but it did not settle. A few parents were no longer pretending to be distracted. One man leaned against his car door, arms crossed, watching openly now. The little girl from earlier whispered again, louder this time. He was helping me. Her mother's hand tightened around hers, but the words were already out. Vanessa turned her head slightly. Helping you how? She asked. The girl hesitated, then pointed at her backpack. It fell open, she said. My papers went everywhere. He picked them up. A ripple moved through the small crowd. Quiet, uneasy, real. Vanessa did not react immediately. She let the truth sit in the open air where everyone could see it. Then she looked back at Laura. So he stepped out of line to help another student, she said. And your response was to isolate him. Laura's jaw tightened. That is not the full context. Then give it, Vanessa said. No raised voice. No anger. Just a direct line that left no room to hide. Laura glanced again at the principal. This time Hayes did not step forward right away. His hesitation was small, but it was enough. Vanessa saw it. Everyone did. We cannot discuss internal disciplinary details in front of other parents, Hayes finally said, regaining some of his composure. If you have concerns, you can schedule a meeting. Vanessa nodded slowly, as if considering the suggestion. A meeting, she repeated. After you have already made a public decision about my child. She gestured lightly toward Ethan's spot under the tree. That was not private. Hayes exhaled through his nose, the patience in his expression thinning. You are misinterpreting a standard procedure. Vanessa's gaze did not waver. No, she said quietly. I am observing it. Another phone buzzed somewhere in the crowd. Then another. Screens lit up as parents began exchanging looks, subtle at first, then less so. The atmosphere was shifting, not with noise but with awareness. Laura crossed her arms tighter, but the gesture no longer looked firm. It looked defensive. "This is getting out of hand," she muttered. Vanessa stepped fully upright now, her hand still resting on Ethan's shoulder. "No," she said again, voice steady. "This is exactly in hand." Her phone vibrated once in her other hand. She glanced down briefly, eyes scanning whatever had just come through. When she looked back up, something in her expression had sharpened. Not anger, not satisfaction, just clarity. "You have separated multiple students under similar claims in the past 6 months, she said, looking directly at Laura now. Same language, same justification, same outcome. Laura's face lost a fraction of its color. "That is not. And every single case involved a student of color," Vanessa continued, her tone still even, still controlled. The words did not rise. They landed. One by one. Hayes stepped forward quickly this time. "Where are you getting that information?" he asked, the calm finally cracking at the edges. Vanessa met his eyes. "From the system you believe no one is watching," she said. The parking lot fell into a deeper silence. Not empty, charged. The kind of silence that comes right before something irreversible begins. Principal Hayes did not respond right away. For the first time since he stepped into the scene, he looked like a man calculating instead of commanding. His eyes flicked briefly toward Laura, then toward the growing circle of parents who were no longer pretending to mind their own business. Vanessa did not rush him. She let the silence stretch again, controlled, deliberate, like she understood that pressure did not need volume to build. "You are making a serious accusation," Hayes said finally, his voice lower now, more measured, but missing the certainty it carried before. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "No," she replied. "I am repeating your data." That landed harder than anything she had said so far. Laura shifted her stance, uncrossing her arms without realizing it, her clipboard lowering just a few inches. "You cannot access internal school records," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "That information is protected." Vanessa's gaze moved to her, steady and unblinking. "It is protected from the public," she said. "Not from oversight." The word oversight hung in the air like a key turning in a lock. A man near the curb straightened his posture. Another parent lowered their sunglasses, watching more closely now. This was no longer just a disagreement. It was something else. Something deeper. Hayes took a step closer, closing the distance slightly, lowering his voice as if that would contain the moment. "I think it would be best if we continue this conversation in my office," he said. "Privately." Vanessa did not move. "You had the opportunity to handle this privately," she said. "You chose not to." Her eyes flicked briefly toward Ethan's spot under the tree, then back to Hayes. "So now we do it where it happened." Laura let out a breath that sounded almost like a scoff, but it did not carry the same confidence as before. "This is unnecessary," she said. "You are turning a simple disciplinary moment into something it is not." Vanessa looked at her for a long second, not judging, not reacting, just seeing. "You already turned it into something," she said quietly. "I am just naming it." Behind them, a car engine shut off instead of pulling away. A parent stepped out, phone already in hand, not hiding it this time. The small crowd was no longer accidental. It was forming. Hayes noticed. His jaw tightened. "We have procedures," he said a little sharper now. "And you are disrupting them." Vanessa nodded once. "Yes," she said. "Because your procedures are producing patterns." That word again. Patterns. It echoed differently now. Not abstract. Not dismissible. Real. Laura's voice came out lower this time, almost defensive. "You are reading too much into isolated incidents." Vanessa's phone buzzed again in her hand. She glanced down, her eyes moving quickly across the screen. When she looked up, there was no hesitation left. 17, she said. Laura blinked. "What?" 17 documented isolations in the past 6 months. Vanessa continued. 14 of those students share one thing in common. She paused just long enough for the implication to settle before she finished the sentence. "They look like my son." The words did not rise. They dropped. Heavy. Final. A murmur moved through the parents now, no longer quiet enough to ignore. One voice said, "That cannot be a coincidence." Another answered, It never is. Hayes raised a hand slightly, as if trying to regain control of a room that was no longer his. We are not going to speculate based on partial data, he said, but even he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. Vanessa took one step forward. Not toward confrontation but toward clarity. You already acted on partial judgment, she said. In front of witnesses. On a child. Ethan shifted slightly under her hand, his shoulders loosening just a fraction, like something invisible had started to lift. Vanessa felt it, but she did not look down. She kept her eyes on the adults who had made the decision. You asked me to step back, she continued, her voice calm, unwavering. Now I am asking you to step up. Hayes opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time there was no immediate answer. No prepared line. No controlled tone. Just a gap. And in that gap the balance of power began to move. The silence did not break all at once. It fractured slowly, like something under pressure finally starting to give. Principal Hayes inhaled, deeper this time, as if trying to gather what remained of his authority before it slipped completely. We are not here to debate statistics, he said, his voice firmer than before, but no longer steady. We are here to ensure a safe and structured environment for all students. Vanessa did not interrupt. She let him finish. Then she nodded once, almost in agreement. Exactly, she said. For all students. The emphasis was slight, but it shifted the weight of his words back onto him. Laura glanced toward the parking lot, noticing more phones now raised, more eyes locked in place. What had started as a routine dismissal had become something else entirely. Something recorded. Something witnessed. This is being taken out of context, Laura said, her voice tightening. We treat every student the same. Vanessa's expression did not change, but something behind her eyes sharpened again. That is the problem, she said. You think you do. A murmur rippled through the parents, no longer quiet, no longer hesitant. A man near the curb spoke under his breath, but loud enough to be heard. That sounds familiar. Another parent nodded, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the scene. Hayes raised his hand slightly again. A gesture that once commanded attention but now felt like a request. Let us bring this back to the facts, he said. Your son stepped out of line. That is a clear violation of procedure. Vanessa looked at him for a long second, then shifted her gaze to the small girl who had spoken earlier. Did he step out of line? She asked gently. The girl nodded, eyes wide but steady. Yes, she said. He helped me pick up my papers. Vanessa turned back to Hayes. So your fact is correct, she said. But your conclusion is not. The distinction landed with precision. Hayes opened his mouth to respond, but Vanessa continued, not raising her voice, not rushing, just continuing. You saw a child step out of line, she said. You did not ask why. You did not look at what happened next. You made a decision based on a moment, not the full story. Laura shook her head, frustration breaking through now. We cannot investigate every small action, she said. We have to maintain order. Vanessa's gaze moved back to her. Order without understanding is not discipline, she said. It is control. The word settled heavily. Control. It echoed differently than discipline. It felt different. Behind them, another parent spoke up, louder this time. He was helping, she said. We all saw it. Heads nodded. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to shift the balance again. Hayes noticed. His posture straightened, but it no longer carried the same weight. We appreciate parental input, he said carefully. But staff decisions are made based on professional training. Vanessa nodded again, almost thoughtfully. Training, she repeated. That is interesting. She lifted her phone slightly, not to show it yet, just enough for them to see it was still in her hand. Because the training records I just reviewed suggest otherwise. Laura's eyes flickered just for a second, but it was enough. Hayes stepped forward quickly. You do not have access to those records, he said, more forceful now. Vanessa met his gaze without hesitation. I do, she said simply. No explanation. No elaboration. Just certainty. The kind that does not need to prove itself. The kind that makes people reconsider what they thought they understood. The parking lot fell into another layer of silence, deeper this time, more focused. Even the distant sounds of traffic seemed to fade. Hayes searched her face looking for a crack, a sign of bluff, something he could push against. He found none. "Who exactly are you?" he asked finally, the question slipping out before he could reshape it. It was not asked with authority. It was asked with uncertainty. Vanessa did not answer right away. She looked down at Ethan again, her hand still resting on his shoulder, grounding him, anchoring him in the moment. Then she looked back up, her voice calm, measured, unchanged. "I am the person who asked a simple question," she said, and stayed long enough to hear the real answer. Her phone buzzed again. This time she turned the screen slightly, just enough for the light to catch Hayes's eyes. He did not see the details, but he saw enough. Enough to know that whatever she had access to, it was real. Laura took a small step back without realizing it. Hayes noticed. And in that moment the shift was no longer subtle. It was visible. The authority that had once stood between Vanessa and her son was no longer solid. It was cracking. And everyone standing there could see it. The question lingered in the air long after it was asked. "Who exactly are you?" It did not sound like curiosity anymore. It sounded like someone realizing they had stepped into something they did not fully understand. Vanessa did not rush to answer. She let the weight of the moment settle first, the kind of silence that forces people to sit with their own assumptions. Around them, the parents had stopped pretending entirely. Phones were no longer hidden. Conversations were no longer whispers. The scene had shifted from private tension to public awareness, and there was no pulling it back. Vanessa lowered her phone slightly but did not put it away. Her hand remained steady, her posture unchanged, grounded in a calm that felt intentional. "I am the person responsible for making sure systems like this work the way they are supposed to," she said finally, her voice even, controlled, leaving no room for interpretation. Hayes narrowed his eyes slightly, trying to process the statement, trying to find a place to push back. "That does not give you the authority to override school protocol," he replied, but the certainty was thinner now, stretched across doubt. Vanessa tilted her head just enough to acknowledge the point without conceding it. "You are right," she said. "It does not." A pause. Then she continued. "But it does give me the responsibility to question it when it fails." That landed differently. Not as confrontation but as accountability. Laura shifted again, her grip tightening on the clipboard as if it were the last thing grounding her in the moment. "Nothing failed," she said quickly. "We followed procedure." Vanessa looked at her, not sharply, not dismissively, just directly. "You followed a procedure that removed a child who helped another student," she said. "And you did it without asking why." Laura's lips pressed together, but she did not answer. Behind her, Hayes exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that comes when control starts slipping and there is no immediate way to regain it. "We are done here," he said, attempting to close the situation. "If you have further concerns, you can schedule a formal meeting with the district." Vanessa nodded once, as if she had expected that response. "That has already been scheduled," she said. Hayes blinked. "What do you mean?" Vanessa lifted her phone again, this time turning the screen fully toward him. "Names, dates, documents. Not random. Organized. Real." He did not need to read every line. He saw enough. His expression shifted just slightly, but enough for anyone paying attention to notice. Laura leaned in without meaning to, her eyes catching a glimpse of the screen. Her posture changed immediately, shoulders tightening, breath catching for just a fraction of a second. Vanessa lowered the phone again, not to hide it, but because she no longer needed to prove anything. "The district review board is already aware of this incident," she said calmly, "including the pattern." The word returned again, stronger this time, backed by something tangible. Hayes took a small step back. Not dramatic, not obvious, but it was a step. "That is not possible," he said, though it sounded less like a statement and more like hope. Vanessa's expression remained unchanged. "It is already in motion," she said. "What happens next depends on what you do right now." The pressure shifted again. It was no longer about what had happened to Ethan. It was about what they would choose to do with the truth now that it was in front of them. Laura looked at Hayes, waiting for direction, but he did not respond immediately. For the first time, he did not have the answer ready. A parent near the curb spoke up again, louder this time, no hesitation. "You owe that boy an apology." Another voice followed. We all saw what happened. The murmurs were no longer contained. They were aligning. Not chaotic. Focused. Vanessa did not turn toward them. She did not need their support to validate her position, but she acknowledged it with a slight shift in her stance, a recognition that the room had changed. Hayes cleared his throat, attempting to regain some ground. "We will review the situation internally," he said. Vanessa's gaze held his. "You already did," she replied. "And you got it wrong." The words were not loud, but they carried finality. Hayes looked at Laura again, then back at Vanessa, and for the first time, the authority he had relied on all afternoon was no longer enough to hold the moment together. Because the system he believed protected him was now being examined by someone who understood it better than he did. And that realization was beginning to show. The air did not move, but everything else did. Not visibly, not loudly, but the shift was undeniable. Principal Hayes stood there, no longer leading the moment, no longer directing the outcome, just standing inside something that had already begun to unfold without him. Vanessa did not step forward again. She did not need to. The ground had already shifted beneath everyone present. "You got it wrong." Her words still lingered, not as an accusation but as a conclusion. Laura swallowed, her confidence now reduced to fragments of what it had been minutes earlier. She looked at Ethan again, really looked this time as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Not as a disruption, not as a problem, just a child. A child who had not moved, who had not spoken beyond a simple answer, who had simply stood where he had been placed. "We were maintaining order," Laura said. But her voice had softened, the edge gone, replaced by something closer to uncertainty. Vanessa did not respond immediately. She let the statement exist on its own, unchallenged for just a moment, long enough for its weakness to show. Then she spoke. "Order without context creates imbalance," she said quietly. "And imbalance always reveals itself over time." Hayes exhaled again, slower now, as if the weight of the situation had finally settled in. "What exactly are you expecting right now?" he asked. It was not a challenge. It was a question. Vanessa met his eyes, calm, direct. "Clarity," she said. "Accountability. And correction." Each word landed separately, deliberate, leaving no room to blur them together. Behind them, the parents had stopped shifting. They were still now, focused, listening. No one was leaving. No one was distracted. The moment had their full attention. Laura glanced at Hayes again, but this time it was different. It was not for support. It was for direction. And Hayes, for the first time, did not provide it. That absence said more than anything he could have said out loud. Vanessa noticed. She always noticed. "You separated him publicly," she continued, her tone steady. "So the correction should also be public." The statement did not rise in volume, but it carried weight. Laura's shoulders dropped slightly, the tension in her posture loosening, replaced by something more human, more uncertain. She began, then stopped, her words catching before they could form. Hayes looked at her, then at the parents, then back at Vanessa. The situation had moved beyond quiet resolution. It was now something that required acknowledgement. Real acknowledgement. "If there was a misunderstanding," Hayes started, choosing his words carefully, "then we can address that appropriately." Vanessa shook her head slightly. "It was not a misunderstanding," she said. "It was a decision. That distinction mattered. It removed the safety of confusion. It replaced it with responsibility." Laura looked down briefly, then back at Ethan. Her voice, when it came, was no longer sharp, no longer defensive. It was careful. "Ethan," she said, "I may have acted too quickly." The words were not strong, not complete, but they were a beginning. Vanessa did not interrupt. She did not correct the phrasing. She let it happen naturally because forced accountability rarely lasts. The small girl who had spoken earlier stepped closer now, her voice more confident. "He helped me," she said again. This time no one pulled her back. No one silenced her. The truth stood on its own. Laura nodded once, slowly, as if accepting something she had resisted moments before. Hayes watched the exchange, his expression shifting from control to calculation to something closer to realization. Vanessa remained still, her hand resting lightly on Ethan's shoulder, her presence steady, unshaken. She was not here to win an argument. She was here to correct a system. And systems do not change with noise. They change with pressure. The kind of pressure that does not leave once it arrives. Hayes finally spoke again, his voice quieter, more grounded. "We will need to review our procedures," he said. Vanessa met his gaze. "You will," she replied. "Because now they are being reviewed by more than just you." The words settled heavily, not as a threat but as a fact. And in that moment the realization fully landed. This was no longer a contained situation. It was no longer something that could be managed quietly or dismissed casually. It had crossed a line. And the person standing in front of them was not just a parent asking questions. She was someone who understood exactly how to follow those questions all the way to the source. And that was something none of them had been prepared for. No one moved to leave. Not the parents. Not the staff. Not even the children who had already been picked up. It was as if the entire space understood that something unfinished still hung in the air. Something that could not be ignored now that it had been named. Vanessa felt it too, but she did not rush it. She had seen this moment before, not here, not with these people, but in different rooms, different systems where truth surfaced slowly and resistance tried to hold it down just a little longer. She kept her hand on Ethan's shoulder, steady, grounding, not just for him, but for the moment itself. "You said you will review your procedures," she said, her voice calm but carrying further now, reaching more than just Hayes and Laura. "But procedures do not review themselves. People do." Hayes straightened slightly, as if the statement required him to respond, but he hesitated again, caught between what he wanted to say and what he now understood he could no longer control. "We have a process for internal evaluation," he said, carefully choosing each word, but the confidence was thinner than before. Vanessa nodded once. "Internal," she repeated. "That is where it started." The distinction settled heavily. A few parents exchanged looks, the kind that did not need words. They understood. Not every detail, but enough. Enough to know this was not an isolated moment. Laura shifted her weight again, but this time she did not speak right away. Her eyes moved from Ethan to the small girl, then to the parents and finally back to Vanessa. The realization was no longer subtle. It was visible now, written in the way her posture softened, in the way her voice had already changed. "I did not mean to single him out," she said finally, the words quieter, less certain, but more honest than anything she had said before. Vanessa listened. She did not interrupt. She let the sentence stand on its own, incomplete but important. Then she responded. "Intent does not erase impact," she said. "It explains it. But it does not undo it." The statement did not accuse. It clarified. Laura nodded slowly, absorbing it, not defending, not deflecting. Behind her, Hayes looked out toward the parents, toward the phone still raised, toward the witnesses who had become part of the outcome. He understood now that whatever happened next would not stay within the boundaries of this parking lot. It would move. It would be seen. And it would be remembered. "What would you have us do in this moment?" he asked again, but this time the question carried something different. Not resistance. Not control. A request for direction. Vanessa met his gaze, her expression unchanged, her tone steady. "You start by correcting what is visible," she said. "Then you commit to addressing what is not." Hayes held her eyes for a moment, then nodded once slowly. It was not agreement yet, but it was movement. He turned slightly toward Laura, giving her space, not instructions. And that shift mattered. Because for the first time the response would not come from authority alone. It would come from acknowledgement. Laura stepped forward, just a small step, but enough to close the distance that had been created earlier. She looked at Ethan, really looked this time, not as a role, not as a responsibility, but as a person. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady but softer than before, "you were helping someone. That was the right thing to do." The words landed gently, but they carried weight. Ethan did not speak. He simply looked at her, his expression unchanged, but his shoulders relaxed just a little more. Vanessa felt it again, that shift, small but real. Laura continued, her voice gaining a bit more clarity. "I should not have separated you like that," she said. And I am sorry. The apology was not perfect. It was not polished. But it was direct. And in that moment it was enough to begin. A murmur moved through the parents again, softer this time, less tense but still present. Not applause. Not resolution. Just recognition. Hayes watched it all, then turned back to Vanessa. We will address the broader concerns, he said. Vanessa nodded slightly. You will, she replied. Because now you have to. There was no threat in her tone. Just certainty. The kind that comes from knowing the process has already started. Her phone buzzed once more in her hand. She glanced down briefly, her eyes scanning the message, then lifted her gaze again. This time there was no question left in the air. Only consequence. And the understanding that what began as a single moment at pickup had already become something much larger than anyone there could contain. The apology did not end the moment. It shifted it. The tension did not disappear. It transformed, settling into something heavier, something more permanent. Vanessa felt it in the stillness around her, in the way no one rushed to leave, in the way every pair of eyes remained locked on what would happen next. Because apologies, she knew, were only the beginning, not the resolution. She gently removed her hand from Ethan's shoulder, not because the moment was over, but because he no longer needed to stand alone in it. He stepped slightly closer to her, not hiding, just present now in a different way. Seen. Hayes cleared his throat again, the sound no longer authoritative, just human. We appreciate your willingness to bring this to our attention, he said. But the phrasing sounded rehearsed, like something pulled from a script that no longer fit the situation. Vanessa did not challenge it. She simply let it sit, knowing that the real shift had already happened beneath the surface. Awareness is not enough, she said calmly. Action is what changes outcomes. The words were not directed at one person. They were directed at the system standing behind them. Laura nodded slowly, as if the sentence landed deeper than the apology she had just given. What would that action look like? She asked, her voice quieter now, stripped of defense, open in a way it had not been before. Vanessa paused for just a moment, not because she needed time to think, but because she understood the weight of what she was about to say. It starts with acknowledgement, she said. Not just here. Not just today. But across every instance that looks like this. She lifted her phone again, not to display it, but to reference it. 17 cases do not happen by accident, she continued. They happen because no one stopped to question them early enough. Hayes looked down briefly, then back up, the realization settling more fully now. We will initiate a full review, he said. But this time it was not a promise made for control. It was a response made under pressure. Vanessa held his gaze. It has already been initiated, she said. What you do now determines how it ends. That distinction mattered. It removed the illusion that they were still in charge of the timeline. Behind them, one of the parents stepped forward slightly, lowering their phone but not putting it away. This is bigger than one kid, he said, his voice steady. We all see it now. A few heads nodded. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. Enough to confirm that the moment had expanded beyond its origin. Laura looked at the group, then back at Vanessa, her expression no longer guarded but reflective. I did not see it that way before, she admitted. Vanessa nodded once. Most people do not, she said. That is why patterns go unnoticed until someone is willing to name them. The word patterns hung again, but it no longer felt abstract. It felt proven. Hayes took a deeper breath, straightening his posture again. But this time it was different. Not defensive. Not performative. Grounded. We will cooperate fully with the review, he said. And we will make the necessary corrections. Vanessa studied him for a moment, not searching for weakness but for sincerity. Then she nodded slightly. That is the expectation, she said. No press. No approval. Just clarity. Her phone vibrated again. This time when she looked at the screen, something shifted in her eyes, not dramatically, but enough to signal that the next phase had already begun. She turned the phone slightly, just enough for Hayes to see the incoming notification. He did not read the full message, but he saw the header. District Oversight Board. His expression changed instantly. Subtle but undeniable. The timeline had accelerated. Vanessa lowered the phone again, slipping it back into her bag with quiet precision. They are no longer observing, she said. They are engaging. The words landed like a final turn of a key. The system was no longer distant. It was present. And there was no stepping back from that. The parents felt it, too. The shift moved through them like a current, quiet but powerful. Laura stood still, her earlier certainty replaced by something more grounded, more aware. Hayes looked out at the group, then back at Vanessa, and for the first time there was no attempt to control the narrative. Only the understanding that it had already moved beyond him. Vanessa reached for Ethan's hand, not pulling him away, just connecting steady and calm. The moment had not ended. It had expanded, and everyone standing there knew it. Because what started as a single decision at pickup had now become a question that would not stay contained. And the answer was already on its way. The moment did not explode. It deepened, like pressure moving beneath the surface, unseen but impossible to ignore. Vanessa stood exactly where she had been. Her posture unchanged, her presence steady, but everything around her had shifted into something more serious, more permanent. The notification she had shown was no longer just a signal. It was confirmation, and everyone felt it. Principal Hayes did not speak right away. His eyes had changed, no longer scanning for control, no longer calculating an exit, but processing something larger than the situation in front of him. The District Oversight Board was not a suggestion. It was authority, real authority, and now it was involved. Laura exhaled slowly, her shoulders lowering as if the weight she had been carrying had finally settled into something real. How long have they been aware? She asked quietly, not to challenge but to understand. Vanessa looked at her, calm, direct. Long enough to recognize the pattern, she said. Not long enough for it to continue unnoticed. The answer did not accuse. It clarified. Hayes shifted his stance again, but this time there was no attempt to reclaim space. We would have reported any concerns through the proper channels, he said, but even he seemed to hear how incomplete that sounded. Vanessa nodded slightly. And yet 17 cases moved through those channels without correction, she replied. That is the concern. The distinction settled again, heavier than before. Not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. Parent, near the front, stepped closer now, lowering their phone slightly, but not putting it away. So what happens next? He asked, his voice steady, carrying the question that everyone else was thinking. Vanessa did not answer immediately. She glanced down at Ethan, who stood beside her, no longer isolated, no longer separate, just present. Then she looked back up. Now the system responds, she said. Almost as if on cue, another vibration moved through her phone. She did not rush to check it. She did not need to. The timing alone said enough. Hayes noticed it too. His gaze dropped briefly to the device, then returned to her face. They are already moving, are they not? He asked more quietly now. Vanessa met his eyes. They do not wait once engagement begins, she said. Laura looked between them, the realization settling deeper. This is going beyond the school, she said. Vanessa nodded once. It already has. The parking lot, once just a place of routine, now felt like something else entirely. A space where something had been exposed, something that could not be unseen. The parents remained, not out of curiosity anymore, but because they understood they were witnessing something that mattered. Hayes took a slow breath, then another, as if steadying himself for what came next. We will cooperate fully, he said again, but this time it sounded less like a statement and more like acceptance. Vanessa did not respond to the repetition. She simply watched him, measuring not his words but his shift. Because words had already been used. What mattered now was alignment. Laura stepped slightly closer, her voice quieter than it had ever been. I did not see it before, she said. Not the pattern. Not the impact. Vanessa looked at her, not with judgment but with clarity. Most people do not, she said again. That is how it continues. A pause. Then Laura nodded, slower this time, more certain. Then it should not continue, she said. That was the first statement that sounded like a decision. Not a defense. Not an explanation. A decision. Vanessa acknowledged it with a slight shift of her gaze, nothing more. Because she knew the difference between words spoken under Pressure and words that carried forward. Hayes turned slightly, looking out at the parents at the phones, at the witnesses who had become part of the outcome whether they intended to or not. This situation will be documented and addressed at the district level, he said, his voice steadying, not regaining authority, but finding structure within the reality that now existed. Vanessa's phone buzzed again. This time she checked it. Her eyes moved across the screen, then paused for just a fraction of a second longer than before. When she looked up, the shift was subtle but unmistakable. They are not requesting documentation, she said. They are issuing directives. That changed everything. Hayes understood it immediately. His posture adjusted, not defensively but in recognition. Laura inhaled sharply, her eyes widening just slightly. The system was no longer observing. It was acting. Vanessa slipped the phone back into her bag. Her movements calm, deliberate, controlled. You asked what happens next, she said, her voice even. Now you will see it. The words did not rise. They did not need to, because in that moment everyone standing there understood the same thing. This was no longer about one decision, one child, or one teacher. It had become something larger, something structured, something that would not stop at the edge of a parking lot. And the response had already begun. The shift did not announce itself with noise. It arrived quietly, like a decision already made somewhere else now reaching the surface. Vanessa stood still, her hand now relaxed at her side, Ethan close beside her, no longer separated, no longer defined by the moment that had placed him apart. The parking lot remained filled, but the energy had changed again. It was no longer tension. It was anticipation. Principal Hayes felt it before anyone said a word. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Once, then again. He did not ignore it this time. Slowly, deliberately, he reached in and pulled it out. His eyes scanned the screen. The color in his face shifted almost instantly. Not dramatically. Not enough for someone distracted to notice. But Vanessa noticed. She always noticed. Laura watched him, her expression tightening as she read the reaction before hearing the information. What is it? She asked quietly. Hayes did not answer immediately. His eyes moved across the message again, as if confirming that what he was seeing was real. Then he looked up not at Laura but at Vanessa. And in that moment the question he had asked earlier returned, but now it carried weight. Now it had context. They are already here, he said, his voice lower than before, almost careful. A ripple moved through the parents. Not panic. Not confusion. Recognition. Vanessa did not react outwardly. She had expected this. They do not delay once directives are issued, she said calmly. Hayes nodded once, slowly, the last piece of uncertainty settling into acceptance. Laura looked between them, her breathing slightly uneven now. Here, she repeated. At the school. Hayes glanced toward the main entrance of the building. The glass doors reflected movement. Not rushed. Not chaotic. Just purposeful. Yes, he said. The word was simple, but it carried everything. The system had arrived. The distance between action and consequence had closed. The parents turned subtly, their attention shifting toward the building. Phones adjusted. Positions changed. No one left. No one wanted to, because whatever came next would not be something told later. It would be something seen. Vanessa followed the direction of their gaze, but her posture did not change. She did not step forward. She did not step back. She remained exactly where she had been since the moment began. Grounded. Present. Unmoved. Laura took a small step backward without realizing it, her earlier certainty now fully replaced by awareness. I did not think it would move this fast, she said, almost to herself. Vanessa's eyes returned to her. It did not, she replied. It has been moving for a while. That distinction settled heavily. This was not sudden. It was the result of something building, something ignored until it could no longer remain unseen. Hayes straightened his shoulders, but not in defense. In preparation. The kind that comes when control is no longer yours but responsibility still is. We will cooperate, he said again, but this time the words aligned with the moment. No resistance. No delay. Just acknowledgement. Vanessa gave a slight nod, not approval, just recognition. Because cooperation was no longer optional. The doors to the school opened. 3 individuals stepped out. Not hurried. Not aggressive. Measured. Professional. Their presence alone shifted the atmosphere again, grounding it in something official, something structured. They walked with purpose, not toward conflict but toward resolution. The crowd parted slightly without being asked. No instructions were given. None were needed. Hayes took a step forward instinctively, then paused, as if reconsidering how to meet what was approaching. Laura remained still, her hands now resting at her sides. No clipboard, no barrier, just presence. Vanessa watched them approach, her expression unchanged, her focus steady. This was not escalation. This was process. One of the individuals stepped slightly ahead of the others, his gaze moving across the scene, taking in the parents, the staff, the positioning, the details that mattered. Then his eyes landed on Vanessa. Not with confusion. Not with curiosity. Recognition. He gave a small nod. Respectful. Intentional. And in that single gesture, everything became clear to everyone watching. This was not a parent who had called for help. This was someone who had activated it. The man spoke, his voice calm, professional, carrying across the space without force. We are here regarding a reported compliance concern. He did not ask who initiated it. He already knew. Hayes stepped forward now, his voice steady, aligned with the moment for the first time since it began. We understand, he said. We are prepared to provide full cooperation. The man nodded once, then turned slightly, gesturing toward the building. We will begin with documentation review, he said. And staff interviews. The words were not dramatic. They did not need to be, because everyone there understood what they meant. This was no longer a conversation. It was an audit. Vanessa finally shifted her stance, just slightly, turning her body toward Ethan, her hand finding his again, grounding him not in the tension but in the outcome. She looked back once more, not at Hayes, not at Laura, but at the system now unfolding in front of them. You asked what happens next, she said quietly. This is what accountability looks like. And for the first time since the moment began, no one had anything to say in return. No one interrupted the process once it began. The 3 individuals from the district did not rush, did not raise their voices, did not need to. Their presence alone carried authority that did not rely on volume. One of them stepped slightly to the side, already reviewing information on a tablet, while the lead representative remained focused on the people in front of him. Principal Hayes stood straighter now, not out of control but out of understanding. He knew the tone had changed. This was no longer about explaining. It was about answering. We will make all records available, Hayes said, his voice steady, grounded in a way it had not been earlier. The representative nodded once, acknowledging the response without praise. We will begin with recent disciplinary actions, he said, specifically those involving student separation. The word separation landed with precision. It was clinical. Exact. And it carried more weight now than it had when it was first used. Laura inhaled slowly, her posture no longer defensive, but reflective, as if each word now carried meaning she had not considered before. Vanessa remained where she was, her hand still holding Ethan's, her presence unchanged. She was not part of the audit. She did not need to be. She had already done what she came to do. The system was now responding to itself. A second representative stepped closer to Hayes, speaking quietly but clearly enough to be heard. We will also need staff training records and incident reports for the past 12 months. Hayes nodded again, no hesitation this time. They will be provided, he said. There was no resistance left in his voice, only compliance. Around them, the parents had grown quieter, not because the moment had lost intensity, but because it had gained clarity. What they were watching was no longer a confrontation. It was a process unfolding in real time, a process that had structure, direction, and consequence. One parent lowered their phone slightly, not because they stopped recording, but because they no longer needed to capture every second. The meaning of the moment was already clear. Laura looked at Vanessa again, her expression different now, not guarded, not defensive, but searching for something more grounded. I understand now, she said quietly. Vanessa met her gaze, not with approval, not with judgment, but with calm recognition. Understanding is where change begins, she replied. But it is not where it ends. Laura nodded slowly, absorbing the distinction. The lead representative turned his attention briefly toward Vanessa, acknowledging her presence again, not as a participant, but as the origin of the process now in motion. We appreciate the report, he said simply. Vanessa gave a slight nod, nothing more. No explanation. No elaboration. Because nothing more was needed. The facts were already in motion. Hayes watched that exchange, and something in his expression shifted again. This time it was not uncertainty. It was realization. He was beginning to understand not just what had happened, but who had brought it forward. And more importantly, how. We will ensure full transparency, he said, his voice more aligned now with the weight of the situation. The representative nodded. That will be expected, he replied. The phrasing was subtle, but it made the boundary clear. Transparency was not optional. It was required. Vanessa glanced down at Ethan, who now stood calmly beside her, no longer tense, no longer isolated. Just present. She squeezed his hand gently, grounding him in the moment, not in the conflict but in the outcome. The small girl who had spoken earlier stepped closer again, this time without hesitation. He helped me, she said once more, her voice steady, no longer uncertain. The representative turned slightly, acknowledging her statement with a brief nod, noting it without needing to question it. Because now every voice mattered. Every detail contributed to the full picture. Hayes looked at Laura, then at the representatives, then back at Vanessa. The full circle of the moment was visible now. What began as a simple dismissal had become a documented event. What was once assumed to be routine had become subject to review. Vanessa finally shifted her stance, turning slightly toward the exit, her role in the moment complete. She did not wait for permission. She did not seek acknowledgement. She had already done what needed to be done. But before she stepped away, she looked once more at Hayes, her voice calm, measured, final. You did not just misjudge a moment, she said. You revealed a pattern. The words settled into the space, not as an accusation, but as a truth that could no longer be undone. Hayes did not respond immediately. He simply nodded once slowly, because there was nothing left to argue. The system had spoken, and this time it had been heard. The process did not pause once Vanessa stepped back. It continued steady and structured, as if the system itself had been waiting for this moment to surface. The district representatives moved with quiet coordination, one reviewing records on the tablet, another speaking with staff just inside the entrance, their voices low but precise. Nothing about it felt rushed, yet nothing was delayed. This was not reaction. It was response. Principal Hayes remained near the center of it, no longer directing, no longer controlling, but participating in a way he had not before. He answered questions. He provided access. He followed instead of led. And that shift was visible to everyone watching. Laura stood a few feet away, her clipboard now lowered completely, no longer held like a shield. Her attention was fixed on the process unfolding, but every so often her eyes returned to Ethan, as if recalibrating what she thought she understood. Vanessa did not interrupt any of it. She stood just outside the immediate circle now, Ethan beside her, her presence still grounded, still calm, but no longer at the center. She had moved from catalyst to observer, allowing the system to reveal itself fully. A representative stepped out from the building again, addressing Hayes directly. We have identified discrepancies between reported incidents and logged actions, he said. The words were simple, but they carried consequence. Hayes nodded slowly, absorbing it. We will cooperate with any corrective measures, he replied, his tone steady, but this time aligned with accountability rather than authority. The representative acknowledged him with a brief nod, then continued. There will be a temporary review of staff responsibilities during the audit period. Laura's posture shifted slightly at that, her shoulders tightening for a moment before settling again. It was not fear. It was realization. The system was no longer abstract. It was now affecting roles, decisions, outcomes. A parent near the edge of the group spoke quietly, almost to themselves. This is what it should look like. Another nodded, not adding anything because nothing more needed to be said. Vanessa heard it, but she did not turn. Her focus remained steady, not on the reaction but on the structure unfolding. Because this was never about a moment. It was about what followed. Hayes looked out at the parents briefly, then back at the representatives. "We will communicate with families once the review is complete," he said. The lead representative responded without hesitation. "Communication will begin immediately," he said. "Transparency is part of the process." That distinction mattered. It shifted control again, placing it firmly within the system rather than the institution. Laura exhaled slowly, her voice quiet but clear when she spoke again. "I understand now why this matters," she said, not to Vanessa, not to Hayes, but to the moment itself. Vanessa finally turned her head slightly, acknowledging the statement with a calm glance. "It always mattered," she said. "Now it is being seen." Laura nodded once, her expression no longer guarded, but grounded in something more reflective. The small girl who had spoken earlier stood closer now, no longer hesitant, her presence steady beside her mother. She looked at Ethan and gave a small, quiet smile. He returned it just as quietly. No words were exchanged. None were needed. The correction had already begun. A representative approached Vanessa directly, stopping at a respectful distance. "We will follow up with you as part of the review," he said. Vanessa nodded once. "You have everything you need," she replied. He acknowledged that with a brief, professional nod, then stepped back, returning to the process already in motion. Vanessa looked down at Ethan again, her expression softening just slightly, not with relief but with completion. She reached for his backpack, lifting it from the ground where it had been placed earlier, handing it back to him without comment. The gesture was simple but it closed the loop. What had been taken from him in that moment had been returned. Around them the energy began to shift again, not dispersing but settling. The parents were still watching, still present, but the intensity had transformed into something quieter, something more certain. The process would continue. The review would unfold. The outcome would reach beyond this space. Vanessa took a small step back, her hand finding Ethan's again, steady and calm. She did not look for acknowledgement. She did not wait for a final word. Because the moment had already delivered what it needed to. As she turned slightly toward the parking lot, her voice carried just enough to be heard by those closest. "Accountability does not arrive loudly," she said. "It arrives when it can no longer be avoided." And this time no one disagreed. The parking lot did not return to normal right away. Could not. Something had shifted too deeply for that. The routines would resume, the cars would pull away, the voices would rise again, but the awareness would remain. It always did. Vanessa walked beside Ethan at a steady pace. Not hurried, not delayed, just moving forward as if the moment behind them had already settled into something complete. She did not look back immediately. She did not need to. She could feel it. The system continuing. The process unfolding. The people still watching. Because when something real is revealed, it does not end when you leave the space. It follows. Ethan adjusted his backpack slightly, glancing up at her. "Are we going home?" he asked quietly. Vanessa looked down at him, her expression softening in a way it had not all afternoon. "Yes," she said. "We are going home." The answer was simple but it carried something more. Not escape. Not avoidance. Completion. They reached the edge of the lot, the sounds of the school fading behind them, replaced by the steady hum of passing traffic and distant voices. Vanessa paused for just a second, turning her head slightly, not fully, just enough to see the building again. The doors were still open. The representatives were still moving inside. Hayes stood near the entrance, speaking with one of them, no longer trying to control the moment, just part of it now. Laura stood off to the side, not withdrawn but changed, her posture reflecting something internal, something that would not disappear when the day ended. Vanessa observed it for a brief moment, then turned back. She had no need to stay. The outcome was already in motion. As they walked, a few parents passed by, their expressions different now. Not curious. Not distant. Acknowledging. One gave a small nod. Another offered a quiet, "Thank you." Vanessa did not stop. She acknowledged them with a slight glance, nothing more. Because this had never been about recognition. It had been about correction. They reached the car. Vanessa opened the door for Ethan, waiting until he climbed in and settled into his seat before closing it gently. She walked around to the driver's side, her movements calm, consistent, unchanged by everything that had just happened. Inside the car, the world felt quieter, contained, but not disconnected. She started the engine, the sound grounding familiar. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan looked over again. "Was I in trouble?" he asked. Vanessa met his eyes, her voice steady, clear. "No," she said. "You did the right thing." He nodded once, accepting it, not questioning it further. Because children understand truth when it is given to them without hesitation. Vanessa looked ahead at the road, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. "Sometimes," she continued, "doing the right thing makes people uncomfortable." Ethan listened, his expression thoughtful. "Why?" he asked. Vanessa paused for a moment, choosing her words carefully, not to simplify, but to make them clear. "Because it forces them to see something they were not looking for," she said. The explanation settled quietly between them. No confusión. No fear. Just understanding in its simplest form. She shifted the car into drive, pulling slowly out of the parking space, merging into the flow of traffic without urgency. Behind them, the school remained, but it was no longer the same place it had been that morning. Not because the building changed, but because the system inside it had been seen. And once something is seen, it cannot return to what it was. Vanessa drove steadily, her gaze forward, her posture unchanged, her presence calm. There was no satisfaction in her expression. No triumph. Just completion. The kind that comes from knowing that something necessary has been done. Her phone buzzed once more in the center console. She did not reach for it right away. She did not need to. She already knew what it meant. The process would continue. The review would expand. The changes would come. Not instantly. Not perfectly. But inevitably. Ethan leaned back in his seat, looking out the window as the school disappeared from view. The moment was behind him now. But the impact of it would not be. Vanessa finally reached for her phone at a red light, glancing briefly at the message. A single line. Initial actions confirmed. Full report pending. She placed the phone back down, her expression unchanged. Then, almost to herself but just loud enough to be heard, she said, "You do not raise your voice to be heard. You raise the truth." The light turned green, and she drove forward,